All right, so the final portion of this chapter is to discuss various CSS properties for text and then talk about different types of CSS styles that we can use both on tags, classes, and IDs. So in reference to the fonts, we already talked about what a font family is, and as you can see over here in our code, we've already created a font family, which basically states that if the person's computer acknowledges and knows what Georgia font is, then use that particular font type. However, if the computer that you are looking at the website on doesn't know what Georgia is, then use Times New Roman. And lastly, if the computer doesn't have Times New Roman, which would be a rarity, or Georgia, then use the default open source typeface called serif. All right, some of the other CSS properties for font is font weight, which basically, as you see here, it configures the boldness of the text. Now, the difference between font weight and bold is no difference, other than you're assigning the font weight to a particular tag or set of tags through the CSS versus going into the actual HTML code and putting bold there. Either way, visually, it appears bold, but to a screen reader, it makes no difference. So if there's any type of emphasis that's taking place in terms of how the screen reader reads your content and you want it to have that emphasis, you'll want to use a strong tag versus using font weight. Likewise, exact same scenario goes for font style, which is where we get italic from. If you want there to be emphasis for an audible listener that they would hear a difference in intonations, you would want to use the emphasis tag in the HTML versus the font style tag in the CSS. Font size refers to the size of the text, and so you can see down here in this next slide, there's a couple different ways that we can go about creating font sizes. The old standby has been a text value that goes from XX-small all the way up to XX-large. These are the values that you would assign to the font size property. These are relative, meaning that regardless of the browser's resolution, whatever their default font size is, we're saying that that's the medium size, and so moving up or down from there would be small or large or etc. And that's how you would see a change in size. Same principle goes for the M unit as in the EM unit. One EM is approximately a 14 pixel letter, which is the standard default font size on most computers and most resolutions. So again, we say that approximately, but basically whatever your current resolution is, and if you like your screen with a bunch of windows and really small font, your one EM might be, let's say, 10 pixels in size versus a person that has an 800 by 600 viewing screen and everything's really large and enlarged or magnified. Their one EM might be 16 pixels in font size. So it makes it completely independent of a particular font size. It's all based on the relative understanding of what the resolution is. Other font sizes are absolute font sizes such as pixels and points, and then lastly is percentage. Now percentage, oftentimes web developers will utilize that for the size of a container rather than for fonts, but obviously you can use it for both. So let's try this out in a few different areas. One of the first things we'll do is we'll look at the actual paragraph and look at that font size. Okay, so right now we don't have any tags here for paragraph, so let's go through and add ourselves a paragraph tag. So I'll go P and then left curly brace, and then I'll say font dash size colon, and then let's do small semicolon. Save the changes and see what it looks like. So it's going to get much smaller, obviously. Likewise, if we were to change the word small to an actual pixel size, so let's change this to 8px. Whenever you have a value and whatever the measurement is, you're going to want to make sure that you don't put any spaces between the values, such as the 8 and the px. So let's save this and refresh, and now you can see how much smaller that size 8 is. And then lastly, if you want to do, let's say 0.9 EM, this is a little bit smaller than the standard font on my computer's resolution, and so you can see what size it is. So that kind of goes through some of the different scenarios with that. Next thing, let's say meeting your business needs. This one, when we're in there. So let's say this H2 we wanted to emphasize for some reason, okay? So again, if I put an EM tag inside the code and it's going to say meeting your business needs, this emphasis is going to apply just to that one H2 tag. So you can see how it's now italicized right there. That being said, if I wanted both of these to take on that italicized, but not necessarily have any kind of emphasis by a screen reader, it's just a visual presentation, I'm better off not adding extra code into my HTML. So I'm going to remove the emphasis that I just put in there. Save the changes. Let's refresh. Everything's back to square one. Let's go back up to here. Now we have an H2 right here. These are the H2 tags. So inside that H2, let's do font dash style colon italic semicolon save and refresh. And now both of those take on that visual italicize. All right, hopefully that explains how to do different types of font differences and whatnot. All right, line height, text align, text indent, and text decoration. So for line height, you know what, we actually already did this in the previous video. So I'm going to continue on to talking about different types of CSS selectors. All right, so there's, as you can see here, there's 4 different types of CSS selectors. What we've done so far for the majority of these, minus the wrapper, these body H1, H2, these are all HTML selectors. They're all being applied to HTML tags that we are all aware of. This wrapper that I threw in there into the lecture in part 2 is a little different. You can see right here that it's got a hashtag in front of it. And wrapper, as you and I know, isn't an actual HTML tag. However, it is being used down here in our code as an attribute to the div tag. Okay? So we made up this word wrapper. That's a typical word to call what we're going to wrap our whole page in. Some people call it container. Most people call it the wrapper. So that is referred to as an ID selector. ID selectors are to be used only one time per HTML page. Okay, multiple times throughout the website, but one time per page. So as you can see right here, there is only one wrapper in this whole document, so that's a good use for it. If you wanted to say like sale, and you're going to have a sale on multiple different types of Nike shoes on your website or some other brand of shoes, so to speak. In that case, the multiple repetitious use of what you would call as an identifier of sorts, you'd want to make a class selector. Whenever you're going to reuse an identifier or a selector or some sort of attribute multiple times in one page, that's when you use a class selector. IDs, once again, can only be used one time per web page. Class selectors can be used multiple times per web page. So let's give this a try. Oh, and then lastly, there's a descendant selector. So I'll go through that in just a little bit. All right, so when it comes to doing a class selector, so right here, you can see in this example on the far right side that the word new is what we have created for a class selector. In front of that word new, there's a period. That period tells the browser that this is a class selector and it's not an HTML tag and it's not an ID tag, okay? So let's create ourselves a class selector over here. So I'm going to go into my code, into the CSS section, and let's press the enter key and press a period, and let's do the word feature. All right, I made up that word feature. Seems like a cool word. Whenever we're going to apply a particular font color to whatever's being featured. So let's go with color, and let's do hashtag C70000. So that's 6 different characters, C70000. Now, we've talked a few times about using shorthand for hexadecimal colors. I would like to point out, in this particular scenario, you cannot do any kind of shorthand with this. Because the C7 is not the exact same 2 characters, we can't shorten this down in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so you can't do C700. That's 4 different characters, and it can be either 6 or it can be 3. Nothing in between. All right, so also for this feature, let's also do something like a font weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, and we're going to specify this to be bold. And again, this is going to be a visual presentation. It's not going to be picked up by audible purposes. All right, so let's save our changes and let's refresh and see what happens. As you can see right here, these 2 items just turned red and bold. Okay, so how did that happen? Because this word feature doesn't exist in HTML. Well, you'll see down here in the HTML code that I've already provided to you, in these two list items, we had to actually go in and type in class equals feature. This is an attribute being class equals, and then the value is in quotation marks. So both of these have that class equals feature assigned to it, and that is why only those two of the list items came up with the red color that we chose right here, the C70000, as well as the bold. Okay, hopefully that was helpful in explaining that. All right, moving on. Let's go on to an ID. Once again, the ID selector is going to be used one time per web page. Prior to HTML5, and even I think XHTML had these tags, but prior to that, we didn't have tags called header. Okay, we didn't have a tag called nav, we didn't have a tag called main, we didn't have a tag called footer. Okay, so when we didn't have those, the way that we were able to communicate with containers of content was we did div ID equals quote header quote. Okay, so that's how we used to do it. So if you look at old versions of HTML or CSS, you'll see those instances. For this class and moving forward, we never, ever, ever want you to do the div ID equals header. We want you to use the HTML5 semantic tag that is simply just header. So keep that in mind. If you did that in the previous chapter, make sure you make the adjustments and changes to only use the HTML5 semantic tags that we've talked about. All right, so that being said, we have this word wrapper in place right here. And so up here in the CSS section, you can see that we preceded the word wrapper with a hash sign. That hashtag correlates to ID. The period that we did in feature correlates to class equals. So keep those two things in mind. All right, so now with the wrapper, we've already changed the background color to FFF, and we could change that if you want to put in like CCC. This is going to be a light gray color. You'll see the changes, and so that's where that's pulling it from. Okay, we also already modified this to be 85% in size, which is great. Save this, go back to white. All right, next thing is, if you recall when I was doing this before, I really would like to have active white space on the left and right side. So let's take care of that now. There's something called a margin. It's a CSS style. We use margins for many things, but basically it pushes your content away from the wall. So check this out. Inside of the wrapper, we're going to say margin dash left colon auto. All right, and then we'll do margin dash right colon auto. What this is doing when you have both of these in place, okay, the key is that you have to have left and right both set to auto, and you also have to have a container such as wrapper not at 100%. Okay, so keep that in mind. You could do an absolute size if you don't want to do 85%. You could do 600 pixels, whatever's going to be best in your resolution. But right now it's at 85%. So let's save this and refresh. And now you see that there's a garter or a border on both sides of active white space, and that's what we want to have happen. All right, so hopefully that makes sense about ID selectors. The next thing that we're going to do is actually create ourselves a descendant selector. Now a descendant selector, as you can see right here, has two different selectors in the same declaration. However, what this is saying in this particular slide is that a paragraph tag inside of a container that has an ID set to content will pick up on these changes. So let's go through a different scenario here. Let's say that we wanted to bold the word listen. Now, or put strong in there, either way. You can see I've already added this to my code. You may not have this in your file that you downloaded. So take a look and make sure that you add the word strong before and after the word listen. And you can see over here in the actual HTML page, listen is nice and bold. So let's say that we wanted to modify only that word listen to a different color. Okay. What I don't want to do is create a generic CSS style for all strong tags to be orange in color. Okay, because obviously if I have another strong tag in here, that wouldn't work. However, I could say for any paragraph that has a strong tag in it, let's make it have let's do a background color. A background color of, let's do 99, who knows what this is, 66FF. Oops, prefix it with a hashtag. All right, so let's see what color that is. All right, so there's a purple color there. So basically what we're saying is that any strong tag that is inside of a paragraph, and as you can see, this strong tag is inside of a paragraph tag, it's going to take on this purple background color. Now, just to prove the point, if I were to wrap, let's say, the list item interactive animation, as you can see right here, in a strong tag, it currently has that strong assigned to there, but it doesn't have that blue background. Okay, it has to be inside of a paragraph in order for it to pick up, I'm sorry, in that purple background. That being said, if I wanted both of these to take on that purple background, I could do that. Now, I could obviously copy and paste this line again and again and again, but then when you decide like, oh, that purple's too dark, I want it to be a little bit lighter, etc., I'd have to update all instances of it. So what we'll do instead is we'll say any paragraph that has a strong tag in there, comma, any list item that has a strong tag in it, it also is going to have that purple color. So let's save our changes and refresh, and now you'll see that both of these have that purple background color. Suffice to say, you might be thinking, well, just why don't you assign that background color to all strong tags? And really, I'm trying to give you a demonstration of what a descendant selector looks like and how to apply it. And this ensures that any other tag that's inside of here that has the word strong wrapped around there, it won't pick up on those same purple background properties that we just assigned to the other ones. Okay, where did I put that word strong? Presence. Where's presence? It's right there. STR. Oops, I spelled it wrong. STRONG. Save. All right, try that again. There we go. There's the present. Oh, but I'm inside of a paragraph tag. So isn't that funny? I'm trying to show you something in here. I end up putting inside of a paragraph tag. So there you go. All instances of the strong tags that are within a paragraph will pick up on that change. All right, hopefully that's a helpful explanation in what a descendant selector is. It's basically for any tag that is within another tag, we'll pick up on it. All right, moving forward, the span. The span element basically says if I would like to apply a particular style that I've created in my CSS, but I don't want to assign it to a full paragraph, I want it to be an inline. The span tag is basically an inline element that allows you to not force a space before it and a space after it, and it will just pick up on those changes. Okay, so let's create ourselves a new style in here, and let's do period and call it alert. And in that alert, let's give it a font size of, let's say, 1.5 EM. Okay, so save this. Now, this alert is nowhere to be found, right? Obviously, let's save it, make sure nothing changes in our document, and you can see that nothing's being assigned to there. However, let's say we put in this Trillium Media. Here's our first paragraph right here, and there's a span class of company, Trillium Media. We'll take over your company. Let's do an alert inside of this paragraph here, okay? So inside the paragraph, we're going to create ourselves another tag, and it's going to be a span, and then class. And the reason why I'm doing class equals is because I did the wrong quotation. Because the alert has a period before there, so therefore it's a class. If it was a hashtag, it would be an ID. So class equals alert, quote, no school on Labor Day. Or I actually shouldn't say no school, business. Business is closed on Labor Day, and then we need to close our span tag, and then obviously the paragraph closing tag was already there. So let's save this and refresh, and now you can see that business is closed on Labor Day is nice and enlarged in terms of the font size. So that is how the span tag is applied. Likewise, we could do another one. As we saw over here, there's a span class equals company, so if we want to create a style for company, we could do that. So because again the class equals, we're going to do period company, left and right curly braces. And let's say we decide that we want to say font weight is going to be bold. And let's say we also say font style will be italicized, italic. Oops, I should probably put this in separate lines so it's easier to read for you. And let's also do letter spacing 1.1 EM. Let's see what that looks like. And then, ooh, that's too much. 1.1 EM is way too much. All right, so let's go down to like 0.2 EM. And refresh. There we go. So now we've got some letter spacing going on. And again, this is assigned to only those instances within the document that we're going to have .company. So you can see we did 2 instances of feature. That's why I picked that up on both of those red ones. We have only 1 instance of company in this particular document. So the last step in all of this process is to take all of the CSS that we've added to this one document and put it into a separate document. Before I do that though, I'm going to come back to my web page and click from Home to Services. And you can see Services has none of the CSS styles that you've just created, whereas Home obviously does. We've been watching this whole time. So what we're going to do is come into our HTML page and take out, we'll leave the style tags there. They're fine to have there as being empty. And we're going to basically highlight everything that's between the style tags, not including the style tags. And I'm going to Control X to cut it out. And you can see we're left with just the style tags at this point. Okay, then we're going to go to New and create ourselves a new file. And I'm going to do Control V to paste. Now that I've pasted this code into a separate document, we're going to go to File and Save As. And make sure you save this to exactly where your other file is located. You can't just stick it on your desktop or in your downloads folder. It has to be in that folder in which you actually are saving all of your other files to. So I'm going to continue navigating there. And the other thing is that we're going to call this one Trillium.css. Okay, so Trillium.css. Now, if you spell this wrong, we'll have to fix it, or we can fix it inside the file. But the name that we're giving to it right here is based on what's already in the code of our document. So let's press Save. Okay, now you can see over here for me it recognized that I have a CSS file. Again, everybody's working in different documents or tools, so yours is going to appear a little differently. But what you do want to see, whether you're using Notepad++ or one of these other tools, is that you do get that color coding effect take place right when you go to save it. If by chance you saved it as a CSS and in Notepad++, once again at the bottom of the Save As window, you'll want to change your drop-down list to Cascading Style Sheets. And then give it a file name. If for whatever reason when you go to save this it does not give you color coding, you want to verify that it did not save it as a TXT file by accident, because most of these editors will do color coding for you, and if all this content stays black like it was just a moment ago, then it means that it likely is not a CSS file. It's not recognizing it, so it's probably just a text file. Alright, so that being said, once I basically cut that information out and pasted it right here and save the file. When I come back to Trillium, our index page, you can see right here this is the link for it. So if I were to take this link out, I'll do a quick Control X and save this file. When I go to refresh this page, all of it's gone, because remember, all that code was between the style tags is gone now and it doesn't know where to look for it. That being said, I did already put the link in here, so you should see what a working link looks like. It's a link space href equals and then whatever it is that you call the file. And again, just to repeat, you want to make sure that the CSS file is being saved to the same folder that this document's being saved in. All right, and then I'll save the change to have that link there, and then I'll come over here and refresh the page and it's back now. Now, not having looked at the services page, if we were to look at the content that is within the services page, open with, let's look at Tincta. So right here is where that link is also located. So when I go from this web page that we're looking at to services, most likely, and it should pick up on all of these colors and changes that we have right here. So let's click on services, and there you go. So what once was a plain page without us touching the services page at all, it now has picked up on all of those changes that we just added to the CSS. And that's the beauty of a cascading effect, is that it cascades in each of the different pages depending on if you've linked them appropriately so. What we don't want to see in your submissions, just to reiterate, we do not want to see in your actual page any content in the style tags, nor do we want to see that you've copied and pasted the content between the style tags to all of your other pages. We want to make sure that it's removed, that it's placed inside of a separate CSS file, and that you've properly linked to it. So hopefully that explains how to best take your CSS code out of your page and put it into an external style sheet. Hopefully this video is helpful in getting you through the chapter. I hope that your submissions go well. Lastly, in the CSS presentation, there is something called a CSS validation. You are encouraged to clicking on this link. I will check for it when I actually grade your homework. It's part of the rubric of grading criterion that you do run your page through a CSS validator. And presuming that you did put a doc type in there, language equals English, and all these other tags are open and closed properly, and that you've added the meta char set, you should not have any issues, and it'll come back with 0 errors. So I encourage you to give that a run before you submit your file, as I will do it to your CSS file as well when you go to submit it for grading purposes. If you have any questions, please reach out and email me or join me during my live office hours. Take care.